Marcello Vieri is the king of Milan, a man whose name is synonymous with silk, gold, and arrogance. Look at you. You come from a land of street food and dusty markets. You think a Filipino can understand Luso? Luxury is in the blood, boy, and your blood, it is common. He called him a rookie. He called him useless. He told him to go back to the kitchen. But in 60 seconds, the king of Milan is about to lose his crown to the man he mocked, because when the system failed, the rookie didn't just step up, he stole the entire world. The Atelier Vieri was a temple of glass and ego. Everything was white. The walls, the floors, the pedestals, all illuminated by thousands of high-wattage LED strips that made the room feel like the inside of a diamond. To enter this building was to enter the heart of European high fashion, a place where a single mistake could end a career before it even began. Luis stood at the back, a silent observer in a world that refused to see him. He had been there for 6 months, an intern brought in through a scholarship program that Marcello Vieri had only signed to satisfy a tax break. To Marcello, Luis was just another face, a pair of hands to carry heavy bolts of fabric and fetch espresso from the corner cafe. But Luis was more than that. He was the son of a master weaver from Aklan. He had grown up with the scent of scraped pineapple fibers and the rhythmic thrum of the wooden loom. Back in the Philippines, his mother had taught him that luxury wasn't a price tag, it was a soul poured into a thread. He had arrived in Milan with a suitcase full of dreams and a single roll of hand-woven piña cloth, the finest fabric his family had ever produced. He believed that if the great Marcello Vieri saw it, he would understand the beauty of the islands. He was wrong. Marcello Vieri walked in that morning, flanked by his models and his entourage of yes-men. He was preparing for the Eternal Gold collection, the biggest show in a decade. The pressure was immense. The Italian fashion industry was watching. The French were waiting for him to fail. Marcello was a man on the edge, his temper shorter than a tailor's scrap. "Luis!" Marcello barked. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the sterile room. Luis hurried over, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Yes, Signor Vieri?" Marcello pointed to a mannequin draped in the raw, unworked Philippine pineapple silk that Luis had dared to leave on the design table. Marcello's lip curled in disgust. His eyes were cold, reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights above. "What is this trash?" Marcello asked, touching the fabric as if it were toxic. "It's piña, sir," Luis said, his voice trembling but clear. "It's hand-woven from the leaves of the red Spanish pineapple. It takes months to create just a few yards. It's more durable than silk and catches the light in a way that—" "Enough!" Marcello shouted. He grabbed the fabric and threw it toward the floor. "This is a house of luxury, not a souvenir shop for tourists. You Filipinos, you are hard-working, yes. You can sew a straight line. You can clean a floor until it shines. But you lack the soul of the elite. You don't understand the feeling of $1 million. You are a rookie. You are a ghost. Go back to the packing room and stay there." Marcello took his designer shears, silver and sharp, and sliced the piña fabric down the middle. The sound of the fabric tearing was like a scream in Luis's ears. It fell to the floor, ruined and discarded. Luis felt the heat rise in his chest, a mixture of shame and a brewing, quiet fire. He didn't argue, he didn't cry. He knelt, picked up the discarded fabric, and walked away. But as he retreated into the shadows of the warehouse, he whispered to himself, "You don't know what you just destroyed." The next 3 weeks were a blur of secret labor. While Marcello spent millions on French lace and Italian velvet, Luis spent his nights in the basement. He didn't sleep. He took the ruined scraps of the piña and began the impossible. He used a needle thinner than a human hair. He took real 24-karat gold thread meant for the billionaire's embroidery and began to fuse it with the pineapple fibers. He used a traditional collado technique, an intricate hand embroidery that created a lace-like effect so complex it looked like a spider web made of light. He was creating something Marcello could never conceive, a fusion of heritage and high-tech elegance. Then came the night of the Milan Gala. The world's elite were seated in a hall draped in black velvet and lit by thousands of crystal chandeliers. The cameras were ready. The lights were so bright they blinded the front row. It was a spectacle of wealth and power. But backstage, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of panic and hairspray. "Where is the centerpiece?" Marcello was screaming, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Where is the golden empress gown?" His lead seamstress ran up, her hands shaking so hard she'd dropped her clipboard. "The chemical treatment on the French lace, it reacted with the high-intensity stage lights, senor. The heat, it's melting the synthetic resins. The fabric is turning yellow, it's falling apart on the model." The Golden Empress was the finale. It was the dress that was supposed to cement Marcello's legacy. Without it, the collection was a hollow shell. The investors were in the front row, checking their watches. The magazines were waiting for the moment. Marcello looked at the gown. It was a disaster. The lace was shredding under its own weight, looking like cheap plastic under the unforgiving glare of the spotlights. "I am ruined," Marcello whispered, dropping into a chair. "Everything is gone. My name, my house, my legacy." "It's not gone." The voice was calm, cutting through the chaos. Luis stepped out from behind a rack of tuxedos. He was bathed in the harsh white backstage light, and for the first time he didn't look like an intern. He looked like a master. In his hands he held a garment bag. "Get out of here, boy," Marcello groaned, not even looking up. "I told you to stay in the back. I don't need a cleaner right now." The French lace failed because it's fragile and artificial. It couldn't stand the heat of your own lights. But I have spent every night for the last month reweaving the piña fabric you threw away. I infused it with gold leaf and reinforced it with indigenous embroidery techniques from my province. It doesn't melt, it glows." Luis unzipped the bag. Backstage went silent. The models who had been gossiping stopped. The stylists dropped their brushes. The dress didn't just shine, it vibrated with light. It was a golden sheath that seemed to hold the sun within its threads. It was tougher than the lace, lighter than air, and more intricate than anything Marcello had ever drawn in his sketchbooks. It was a masterpiece born of spite and soul. "You did this?" Marcello asked, his voice a breathy whisper. He stood up, drawn to the dress like a moth to the flame. "The rookie did this," Luis replied, looking Marcello dead in the eye. "Now do you want to save your show, or do you want to lose your empire?" Marcello didn't hesitate. He pointed to his lead model. "Put it on her, now." The music shifted. The rhythmic, heavy tribal beat of the Philippines began to mix with a soaring Italian opera. It was a sound the Milanese crowd had never heard before. The lights in the hall dimmed for a split second, a moment of pure darkness, before exploding into a brilliance so intense that people in the front row had to shield their eyes. The curtains parted. The model stepped out in Luis's creation. The piña fabric caught the 50,000-watt spotlights and shattered the light into 1,000 shimmering rays. It didn't look like fabric, it looked like a celestial event. Every movement the model made created a ripple of gold. The collado embroidery created shadows that danced like shimmers across the runway. It wasn't just luxury, it was a revolution. It was the impossible fabric that the Italian master said didn't belong in a house of lusso. The audience stood up, one by one. The silence of the hall was broken by a single gasp, then a roar of applause that shook the glass walls. The critics, known for their coldness, were standing on their chairs to get a better look. Marcello watched from the wings, his face a mask of shock and realization. He saw his name being saved, but he also saw his own ignorance staring back at him. He had looked down on a culture he didn't understand, only to be saved by the very brilliance he had tried to shred. The newspapers the next day didn't talk about Marcello Vieri. They talked about the golden boy from the islands. They talked about the piña revolution. They talked about how the world of luxury had been shaken to its core by a man they thought was just a rookie. They laughed at his roots. They mocked his skills. They called him useless and told him he didn't belong. But when the lights were at their brightest, it was the Filipino talent that outshone them all. Because true luxury isn't something you can buy or inherit. It's something you weave with your own hands, your own heart, and your own heritage. Never underestimate the power of Filipino talent. From the dust of the province to the lights of Milan, the rookie didn't just join the show, he became the show.